weapon of choice, my palette knife. I switched from a 45 to a palette knife. When I prep a piece, I have no idea what's going to actually be the finished product. I just start mixing the paints, blending the paints, and then I see something in it that I develop. They all reflect on places I've been and thoughts I've had, things I think, the past. The gangsters, of course, were a big part of the past. Our family goes back centuries in Sicily, and they were always criminals. They were always mafia. What I always knew was that no matter what, I was going to get kind of sucked into that life, because especially when I got back from Vietnam, you know, I did the music thing, I went to college, I did all of this, but I always knew that it was almost like a thing in your heart where you feel that if you didn't do it, you were letting down the family. And when I say I was the last one, I was the last Sicilian in my family. And the Gambino family is the only family out of all the 26 families in the country that, to be a boss, to be a lieutenant, a capo, you have to be Sicilian. You know, it's the only Sicilian family.
When he was 7 years old, he had to tell the teacher, I can't be the class monitor anymore, or you're a rat, and all that.
My mother said, we're moving to the suburbs, and everybody in the family chipped in, and we bought this house, you know, in Brooklyn. And we just loaded it up with the family, all 3 floors. Okay, the second house in is where I grew up. Yeah, right there. You see those white garage doors?
Yep.
On the other side of those garage doors was Nino's bedroom. I lived on the top floor. My grandmother lived in the middle, and Nino lived on the bottom. That was what's famously known today as the bunker. You see, they removed all this shit. We used to have iron bars on all the windows, and I mean, it was a fortress, man. I never took like an art class in high school. Art was like for the sissies, you know, and it wasn't, you didn't take art, you know. That wasn't like allowed in my crowd. See, it was okay to have a doo-wop group, and I loved music. I mean, I sang in high school. I mean, we had like a serious recording group at 4 Directions. I used to call it the 4 Erections. We recorded on Decca Records, we were in Billboard magazine, you know. I mean, we did 13 television shows and stuff. We weren't like a minor group. So, I mean, we opened for the Drifters, you know, I mean, we were up there. Well, we needed like this last push, you know, to really like get up there. My family, meaning the Gambino family, they had a guy, Larry Martiri, who ran Roulette Records, which at the time, Roulette was like the hottest label around. So I went to my uncle and I said, look, you know, we need this little bit of push. You know, if you could get us transferred from Decca onto Roulette, and we record something on Roulette, that'll give us a lot more exposure, it'll give us a lot more push with the DJs when they see Roulette, you know. And he said, no, can't do it. I said, what are you talking about? You can't do it. I said, 1 phone call, you could do it. And he said, no. He says, I don't want you in that business no more. He says, that business is all drunks and drug users and womenizers. I don't want you in that business. So, okay, great. It's okay to blow somebody up in a car, but it's not all right to sing. You know, I mean. So that was basically the end of my music. It got to a point where I was so depressed over that, I joined the Army. In high school, I was like I majored in tool and die making. I got hired by Grumman. And I worked on the LEM, the Lunar Expeditionary Module. One day I was there and I was working a horizontal milling machine, which has this white coolant that cools the friction on the metal. And it gathers up in this big base of the machine. And this foreman, his name was Bob Jurasak, told me to clean the metal chips out of the coolant. And I said, no. And I said, I'm a tool and die maker. I don't do that. You got people here, which they did. They had people of Latin descent that were working there, did all of that. They did the filing, they did all that. He said, no, you clean it. And I said, I ain't fucking cleaning it. And he said, well, if you don't fucking clean it, you're not, this was his line, you're not getting your turkey for Thanksgiving. I said, you know what, you fucking dumb Polish motherfucker? I don't want my fucking turkey. He said, are you getting nasty with me? And I threw a wrench at him. And he said, you're fired. And I said, no shit. So I left Grumman, and on the way home, I had to take the Hempstead Turnpike to get back to Levittown. And I passed, there was the Army, the Marines, the Navy, and the Coast Guard, the recruiters. And I was driving, and I said, let me see what this Vietnam fucking thing is about. I walked in and I said, all right, I'm here. I said, I want to be a Green Beret. And the guy fucking laughed. I mean, he laughed. He said, are you kidding me? How many chances you got to actually go to war? How many chances you got to actually be a fucking warrior? There's no bigger thrill in combat. I mean, combat's the ultimate fucking game. You gotta be ready to die. Because that's what's going on. That's the game. And I was on my hunter-killer team. I used a 22-250 with a psionic silencer. But I could hit a gnat in the ass at 1,100 meters, and you wouldn't even hear a sound. And that's what we used to do. We used to fuck with the NBA. We'd find them, and we'd use night vision. So at night, they're sitting there thinking they're safe, and they're just doing their rice like this, and all of a sudden, you got no head. And you never heard nothing, you never seen nothing. And we took a shot from 300 meters.
As a point man, Dominick was very methodical. He had good eyes, he had good hearing, and he was slow. He didn't rush. I've seen a lot of people would rush through things and break through the bush and break through Dominick wasn't that way. He just was a natural walking point. He was very observant, very quiet, and that's what kept a lot of people alive, kept a lot of guys alive, So I felt better when he was on point than anything else.
We look out for one another. We cover one another's back. I got your back. You got mine. We all made it out. Some of them come back with wounds. Dominick got hit pretty hard up in Dog Toe. He was Dog Toe. He was up in the Iron Triangle. He was in all those battles. Like I said, the biggest battle he was in was Hill 875. That made history of the 107th Airborne Brigade. And he was in the 4th Battalion over there. Matter of fact, he went to battalion. The reason he went to battalion, he wanted to see some action. Action wasn't fast enough there, but he went to the 4th Battalion.
Scariest thing ever was Hill 875, period. After that, there was no fear. Actually, it was the single biggest firefight of the whole Vietnam War in 11 years. And it came down to hand-to-hand combat up there. Hand-to-hand is serious shit, man. When you're ripping somebody with a bayonet, it's a whole nother fucking deal than shooting somebody. You gotta stay back to back. I mean, it's a gang fight. That's what it is. Out of all my experiences in Vietnam, I think that was one single thing that just really twisted my head. you were sloshing, and you know, when you look down, you realize like what you were sloshing through was just blood. The ground was soaked with just blood. You know, it was running down from the top, you know, from bodies that were up there. It was people that were here that were, you know, and you were just like walking and squishing in blood, you know, and you were fighting in it, you know. So it was like, it was a horror show. After the firefight was over, down in the valley in Docteau, where our base camp was, they had like these 40-foot refrigerated, you know, tractor trailer kind of things. And you just went in, and they were just trying to put bodies together. So if I saw like this arm, I'd look at it and say, oh, yeah, it's Dominick's arm because he had this tattoo and that tattoo, and we were just bagging up pieces of people.
Right.
And that went on for like 2 weeks.
But you know, it was an experience. You come straight out of off the streets and you see all the killing, all the bombing, all the mayhem, you know. It's one of them things, and I'm surprised I come out of all my sanity.
It's something that I constantly think about all the time. When we came home, you know, they took us by chopper. They brought us out base camp, and our base camp at the time was in a place called Biennois, which was like 40 miles north of Saigon. And packed all your shit together, and they took you by a deuce and a half, this truck, over to Tan Son Nhut, and you got on an airplane to go home. Now here you go, you get in this plane, and you haven't seen a round eye girl in a long time. And now, you never saw a miniskirt, all right? So now you get on this plane and you go, what the fuck is happening here? Like, are they hookers? I mean, you don't know what the hell's going on. But I mean, we came home to a whole nother world. Joe Rico popped a hit of acid in my mouth the second night I was home. And I mean, here I am tripping, and 3 days earlier, I was still in the bush. You know, so, and that just led to more drugs and more drugs and more drugs and music, and it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, 60s style. When I got out of the Army, got married and moved out to Berkley, which at the time was called Berkley. You know, that's where all the riots were, Mario Savio, you know, when you talk about the social changes, Berkley was the hotbed for that. You know, and me and my new wife moved out there, and I had long hair, and I was playing music, and I was doing that, but I was like the anti-hippie, because I couldn't get into debates with those people. I just didn't understand why, you know, the American people were actually against the American soldiers. You know, certain things I could put up with, like the protests, and there was other protests that, you know, I had no problem with. But when I seen that Viet Cong flag, and you're waving that VC flag, you're gonna see one crazy motherfucker dive into you. Fuck the sheriffs, man. Oh, I went through them like a fucking knife with butter. You know, a hot knife with butter. Don't wave a Viet Cong flag in my face. You know, in our mind, what we fought in Vietnam for was for you to have the right to protest. Don't burn my flag, and don't wave the enemy's flag in my face. Anything else is cool, man.
We only had heard the guy sing. He never took music lessons. All of a sudden he's playing piano, composing music, and playing saxophone. He was playing with the reed backwards and still getting sound. That he taught himself. I mean, we know the guy, you know, you could sing, but you know, all of a sudden you see him stepping out in another direction. He's writing music, you know, he's singing, he's composing, he's playing two instruments. Just like that. I mean, the guy only fucking sang when I left him in high school.
I was a music major. Yeah. Did music composition and all that. Then one day, went to see The Godfather, and it was almost surrealistic. Because when we walked out after seeing the film, we just kind of looked at each other and said, it's time to go home. And, that's what we did. We moved back to Brooklyn. And that was the start of this whole fucking mess, which is called my life. Basically, that's what it was. I didn't decide I was going to enter into a criminal thing. When I came home, when I decided to come back to New York, I had no intentions of coming back to New York and becoming a criminal. I came back to New York because my mother was dying. All right, that was number one. My mother had Hodgkin's disease.
We were in Vietnam together. You got a bunch of guys sitting around in the bush or in our base camp, and we'd drink a beer and be talking. And he explained to us his family about his Uncle Nino. So we knew all about that. I'm a kid from the suburbs of St. Louis. I went to Catholic schools and Catholic college and everything else. This was an alien to me. I didn't understand it. But I mean, it was obvious he knew what he was talking about. And we got to be closest friends. Him and Macabre and I were closest friends. And I thought it was probably a natural progression. He probably had no choice.
And Nino grabbed me one Sunday and he said, now you got to get serious. He said, you got a kid coming on. You got a wife. You're going to have a family. What do you plan on doing? And I said, to tell you the truth, I really don't know. And he said, well, look. And he said, I got this chance to buy this car service. He says, I'll buy it. He said, there's this other guy there, Nicky D'Amato. He's putting up half the money. I'll put up half the money, and you and him could run the car service. It was Plaza Car Service on Avenue U and Kings Highway. That's where I first met Roy DeMeo.
They dropped on somebody's hand.
Will you stop with that camera already, Freddie? This guy's nuts. Come on, Freddie, will you stop? I'm gonna shoot you.
Nino had driven his brother's wife to the grocery store on Bath Avenue. And she got out of the car and there was a bunch of guys hanging out there and they made a comment. And Nino jumped out of the car with a hammer and started trying to beat them. And this one guy hit him and broke his nose. 12 years later, he said to me, he said, we got to whack this guy. I said, for what? He said, he told me the story. 12 years ago, blah, blah, blah. I said, 12 years ago, you broke your nose. Now we're going to kill him? And he said, yeah, but you got to do it. I said, why? And he said, because if you're going to be in this thing, you got to, you got to make your bones. So what happened was, his car was parked on 20th Avenue and Bath Avenue, like a block away from the 6-2 precinct. And what we decided to do was rig a hand grenade in his car. All right. So I broke into the car and I had the hand grenade. And I rigged it like under his seat and cut the spoon with pliers so the spoon wouldn't get hung up when it sprung underneath the seat. And I took fish hooks, the leads, and I tied one around the pin and hooked it into his driver's side door, and one around the body of the hand grenade and hooked it into the floor. Got out the back. Then I broke toothpicks in the doors and stuffed them in, so like if he tried to get in any other door, it wouldn't work. The only door that he could get in was the driver's side. But also, aside from the precinct being there was PS 200, which was all the kids going to school. So this was around midnight that I rigged it. So I went home, and it was only a block and a half from where I lived. I went home and I sat on the porch, and what I figured was if I didn't hear a boom by like 6 in the morning, I was gonna go and defuse it. You know, I was gonna go remove it, because then there would have been kids going to school and shit. But about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard the and I went to bed, you know, because it worked, you know. And that's basically when, you know, I had my stock in the life. That's what they say, your stock has risen. So my stock rose. But it's all fucked up anyway, because your stock, it don't matter. Because the tougher you get, the more scared they get, the more they try and keep you down. And oddly enough, what happened was he didn't die. It blew him out of the car. He wound up on the marquee of the Deluxe movie theater on Bath Avenue. And he was all broken up. He had a lot of broken bones and shit. And what happened was, after he healed up, you know, he took off and he lived in California for like 2 years. Because he thought it was Sammy the Bull's crew. Jerry Papa, Sammy the Bull, Jamie Hammer. He thought it was them doing it. So when they assured him, you know, that he could come back, he came back. And then it was my wife's birthday party, right? And we're all, you know, birthdays were a big thing in my house. And we had the cake, and we had all the presents and shit, and Roy DeMeo came over, and he said, guess who I just saw on 85th Street, hanging out in front of the candy store? And I said, who? He said, Vinnie Mook. Once Nino heard that, he said, all right, let's go downstairs. We went downstairs, we loaded up, and we put on our disguises, and we hung out like across the street. And when he went to go to his car, we just shot him. We were using Roy's car, a white Caddy, and we got in the car and we're trying to pull out, and there's this fucking guy behind us blowing his fucking horn, right? And Nino was saying to Roy, he's saying, this fucking guy knew just what we just did. You think he'd be blowing his horn? And Roy said, you know, you want me to get in a car? I'll whack him right now. I'll just shoot him in the fucking head. Nino said, no, he didn't do nothing. He's just blowing his horn. It was a strange time. And it gets you into that, you know, that mindset. Well, okay, it's okay for me to kill Vietnamese for $278 a month. But it's not okay for me to kill people that are trying to kill me back here in the States, where I can make some real money. You know.
When Nino and Roy come up to you and say, we're going out and get this guy, I mean,
You don't say
you either did it or they're going to get you.
Right.
There was no decision, there was no choice, there was no time to make an excuse, you're there. So in that case, you had no chance.
To kill a guy in front of his wife or his kids, you know, or you get killed. You know, I mean, there's rules. They have serious fucking rules, and they enforce them. And I think it's probably because they all know they're either going to get killed or go to jail, and they don't want anybody killing them in front of their wives and kids. I never killed anyone because I was pissed off at them. It was always business, you know. And you know, a lot of people don't realize, like, you might have killed people, but on the other hand, what they don't realize is that, you know, those people were looking to kill you too. You know, so that was the business. That's the life we chose. There's the family, La Familia, the Bogata. Inside of the Bogata, you have crews. I was the overseer of a crew. The DeMeo Crew was, aside from being big-time money makers in every type of racket you could think of, they were also all killers. The type of killers that dismembered bodies and made them disappear. You know, they hung out at the Gemini Lounge. You know, I used to call it the horror hotel, you know, because you never knew what the hell you were going to find in there, because they were just crazy. They just loved chopping bodies up. You know, that's what they did. The DeMeo Crew basically was the nucleus. I mean, there was probably 20 of them, 25 of them that were all capable of killing. But the hardcore core of the DeMeo Crew was, of course, Roy DeMeo, Chris Harvey Rosenberg. Then there was the Gemini twins, Anthony Senta and Joey Testa, Henry Borelli, Joey Dracula, Joe Guillermo, Danny Grillo, Carlo Profeta. Vito Arena probably rounded out the hardcore inner core of the DeMeo Crew. Nino would spend 5-6 months out of the year in Florida. So I had to like basically oversee the crew and report to him what they were up to. I would collect money from them on Friday nights and go to Paul's house on Sundays, Paul Castellano. I go to his house in Staten Island and deliver the money and the slips and what this was from, what this was from, and then eventually, after Nino opened up, you know, not opened up, but after he had to be at the club on 86th Street all the time, he got kind of paranoid about going to the Gemini when he was here. So I was the only one that went there. That's how I got to kind of know what was going on, you know, especially from Henry and Danny. I used to go there like 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and I could walk in there and just tell if they hadn't killed anybody lately, because they'd all be depressed. They'd all be just like sitting around moping, you know. But if they had just like done some work, they were all like, you know, they were still on the high.
Did you meet my friend Ben? He's one of the Dover brothers.
Ben Dover?
Dover. Really?
And there was a case in there from 1975, the homicide of Andre Katz. Here's a guy that was a car dealer, and they were all involved in cars and shipping them overseas. And this guy became an informant, and 2 of these wise guys from the DeMeo Crew grabbed this guy and brought him out to a supermarket out in Queens and put him on a bandsaw after they killed him. Chopped him up into 1,000,000 pieces.
They took him to a pantry pride in Queens, and they chopped him into pieces. But before they did that, they put his head in a trash compactor. That's how they killed him. And they found the pieces. The coroner put them together in the back of the parking lot behind the pantry pride. So you see like an arm over here, an arm over there, torso, legs over there. And then you see the head. It looks like a fucking pancake, you know?
Absolutely the most dangerous crew in the world. I mean, that came out of John Gotti's mouth himself. He said, you know, you got to be careful with Roy DeMeo and his crew, because he's got all shooters around him. There were 20, 25 of them. You know, they did hundreds and hundreds of murders. We still don't know the full extent of it.
That was the first one they did. And then they learned a lesson, because what they did was they threw the parts in a dumpster. And some guy walking his dog pulled out a fucking arm and came running up to the guy with the arm, and the guy called the police and they found the body. So what they used to do after that was they take them apart and put them in garbage bags, the parts, individually, and put those in cardboard boxes and put them outside in the dumpster of the Gemini Lounge. And one of them's cousins owned a carting company, and they'd call for a pickup, pick up the garbage, bring it to the fountain there in your dump. And nobody could find the bodies then, because there was, I mean, when we came to trial, there was 250 homicides charged. You know, Roy alone had at least 50. Chris had to have that number. Art Ruffles from the FBI said he was the head of the FBI part of the Organized Crime Task Force. He said, we've never had a case in U.S. history where there was 11 serial killers altogether. You know, they had it down to a science. You know, I mean, they enjoyed it, you know. I mean, I did certain things on the street that I had to do, but I can't say I enjoyed it. You know, I mean, I walked in there one night, because on Friday nights we all used to eat in there. And I walked in there, and the dining room was here, the kitchen was here, and the bathroom was here. And you could see in the bathroom there was 2 naked bodies hanging, you know, in the shower by their feet with their throats cut. And they already bled out because there was no blood coming out. And I walked in, and, you know, there was a spaghetti and everybody's eating and stuff like that. And I looked into the bathroom, and I told Roy, DeMeo, I said, "The fuck is that?" He said, "Ah, don't worry, they're not staying for dinner." You know, that was their humor.
These guys were like dangerous. They looked dangerous. They felt dangerous. I've been around dangerous men all my life, but these guys were edgy. They weren't like the old-time hardened guys. They were like nervous guys, like new gunslingers in those cowboy movies, like a 24-year-old guy. And they were making me really uptight. I mean, it's the last guys I wanted to get high with and be with. And we go to this bizarre fucking club, and bizarre was the word for it. I mean, it looked like something out of a Ralph Steadman cartoon, like, you know, these fucking weirdo people in these kind of berserk clothes from India and all these countries. And then we walk in with this obvious, like, you know, hit crew of lunatics, you know. So she said, I'm with these guys. So, and we had huge amounts of coke, like, you know, bags of this shit. And we go into these old urinal restrooms. Dominick and his buddy, they picked this big fucking knife in this thing. I dropped more coke on my shoe than I did in a year. And the tension was unbelievable. I felt like a high wire pole fucking being pulled by 2 tornadoes in the Midwest. I mean, it's the last guys I wanted to get high with and be with.
And I mean, they were so free. I mean, John Gotti, they have a tape, the FBI, of when somebody tried to put a contract out on the crew, on Roy DeMeo and the crew. It's a conversation between Gene Gotti and John Gotti. And Gene had got wind that there was a big contract out. I was telling John, and John said, well, what do you think? He said, we can't take it. He says, these guys kill more people before breakfast than our whole crew killed in our career. And the Gotti crew didn't go after Paul Castellano until we were all gone, you know, because they would have never survived it, you know. But once the DeMeo Crew was gone, because we would eat the strong arm for the family. We had anti-tank weapons. We had M72 grenade launchers. I mean, we had arsenals, you know. Whatever we needed to do, we could do. Well, the only way that they got under indictment was they were exporting stolen cars to Kuwait and the Middle East, okay? Because the Arabs were buying them up. They wanted Chevy Caprices without no leather in the inside, because I guess it's against some Habib or whatever the fuck they believe in. So they had to have cloth interiors. And I mean, we're talking like 150 cars at a time were going over to Kuwait, you know. And some inspector down here at the docks noticed that one car had the trunk lock punched out. Found it curious. They checked out that car. They found out that the VIN numbers had been changed. So they said, well, let's check out a few more cars. And they found out that, like, there's over 100 cars here with phony VIN numbers. Who's sending the cars? And it came back to the DeMeo Crew. You know, they had a company over on Coney Island Avenue. And that's what brought the first indictments. And when the first indictments came down, then it just snowballed. Because now they started looking at murders and they started connecting the dots. You know, and you know, who says, like, without a body, there's no crime? That's not true. So finding that one car down there at the docks opened up the whole investigation. It went all the way to Paulie Castellano, the capo di tutti capi, the boss of bosses. That's where they made their first mistake. But then during the case, witnesses were disappearing. I mean, they were just killing everybody. They were just killing everybody that could say anything about them. And they were just disappearing. They were just vanishing. You know, I was 5 years old when, you know, Nino kicked my father out of the house. My father had done a little bit of this and that, you know, for my uncles. But they wanted him, they had this insurance scam going. And they wanted him to crash this car on 86th Street under the L and he wouldn't do it. But after that happened, they got so pissed off at him, you know, my Uncle Roy and Nino, that they started telling my mother, you know, you got to get rid of this guy and he can't live with us no more. He's like a drunk and he's this and he's that. I know they threatened to kill him if he didn't leave. When my father was there, and then I remember when he wasn't there. And when he wasn't there, Nino took over. He became my father, but he created this monster. But as an 11, 12-year-old, you don't realize what they're doing to you. You know, it was almost like a cult thing. You know, they're just shaping you into what they wanted you to be. You know, his big mistake was he just shaped me into the wrong person. And my mother always told him that. My mother said, do not let him get involved in this life because he's not going to listen to anyone. So, I mean, I got fed all these lies all my life by Nino, by my grandmother.
His father died of heartbreak. I think when Marie, Dominick's mother, passed away, his father would sneak into the church or the mortuary and they'd let him visit. He died shortly after that. He loved Marie, and that was part of the family, drove his father out. But they also told Dominick a whole different side of it, a whole different story.
After I, spoke to my Aunt Sue, who was my father's sister, and had found out all these good things that he had done, how he tracked me in Vietnam. He was asking all these questions about, how is he and blah, blah, blah. Then I found out all these good things. And it just, it fucking destroyed me. Because at that point, he was dead. But I just think about it all the time, that I would just love to be able to just, hug him one time and say, it's okay, man, I'm your boy. And you can't do that once they're gone. I need to take a break. I do.
Something I feel really bad about was the Danny Grillo story. Danny was part of the DeMeo Crew, a very, very good friend of mine. Danny had a really serious gambling problem. One night he went down to Mulberry Street to a crap game that was run by Matty the Horse. Danny dropped $250,000, which Danny in no way had the money. My uncle and Roy covered the debt. And the thing that they told Danny was, there is no more gambling. It wasn't a long time afterward that Danny came to me and told me he had dropped $110,000, And I said, Danny, how could you do something like that? How could you fuck up like that? I mean, Danny was a tough guy, man. Danny was a fucking bank robber. Danny was a kidnapper. Danny was a killer. He was reduced to a blithering idiot. And I said, look, all you can do right now is go home, all right? Let me talk to my uncle and let me see what I could do. At that time, Danny was under some serious pressure by the law because he had killed Ruby Stein, which was the biggest loan sharks in New York City and very close with the Gambinos. But anyway, I had to tell my uncle, look, I'm washing my hands of it. Danny's fucked up and this is gonna go on, and because of the heat that was coming on him from the feds and NYPD, organized crime, about the Ruby Stein hit, I said, if they grab Danny right now, he's gonna rat. That's all I had to say. By the next morning, I was getting phone calls from his wife Danny didn't come home last night. And I walked up to the Gemini, and Chris was walking out of the Gemini. When I walked by Chris, I said, "You seen Danny?" He said, "No, do you see him no more?" And he just kept on walking. Then I found out that they had parked his car on the Brooklyn Bridge and left the passenger side open, so like to make it look like he slid across the seat and just jumped off the bridge. I think the thing that bothers me more than anything is Chris saying that to me. He said, "Oh, don't worry, nobody's gonna see Danny no more." Well, when I got passed over, you know, getting made, and there was guys younger than me getting made, you know, so I knew right then it wasn't Paulie. I knew it was Nino that didn't want me to get made because he didn't want me to have my own crew. So what I did was I put my own crew together, the Hole in the Wall gang. We were doing all Mafia stuff, but it wasn't a Mafia crew. Totally against all the rules of the family. I wasn't supposed to have a crew. Nino and Roy brought me out to Matty Rager's restaurant in Union City, New Jersey, and I was gonna have to pick up the vig every week. I found out that Matty was one of the biggest cocaine movers in the city. He had all the connections with the Cubans. I had another partner, who I don't want to mention his name, and him and Matty kind of got together. And then during a heist that I did on Long Island, we took off this dope dealer in Long Island, and when we were leaving the place, there was this girl sitting in the bedroom reading a Cosmopolitan magazine that we had missed. And when we were going to leave, I looked in there and saw her. And I started to move toward the door, and then I said, no. Hey, you want to stay with these jerk-offs, or you want to come with us? And she put down the Cosmopolitan, and she looked at me, and closed it, put it aside, and she said, "Give me 5 minutes, I'll come with you guys." This particular woman that I had met, who I developed a hell of a relationship with, was the Quaalude Queen. That was the fourth member of the Hole in the Wall gang. The fifth member was part of the DeMeo Crew, Henry Borelli. And then we had some associates, but Hole in the Wall came from where we rented a penthouse in Fort Lee, New Jersey. No one knew that location but us. We took over the Quaalude market at Studio 54. In the 70s, it was a hell of a market. I mean, we were getting these jars for $500 a piece, you know. And there was 500 pills in a jar, and she was moving them at $10 a piece. So we were paying $500 for it. We were getting, our return was $5,000. We incorporated all our rackets into that crew, and everybody had their own shit. I mean, if you want to look at, there was extortion, you know, shakedowns. You know, we'd have like this deal where we'd find out about, say, a nightclub, right, that wasn't paying anyone. I'd go in there over a period of like a month, 2 months. I'd really get tight with the owner, where the owner would know who I am. Then at the right point, we'd send Henry in and another friend of mine, and they would just go in there and terrorize the place. I mean, they'd terrorize it. They'd put a gun in the owner's mouth and just say, "This is what you gotta pay us a week." He would come to me, the owner, and say, "Dominick, I got a serious problem with these maniacs. They came in there, they put a pistol in my mouth. They told me I got to pay them like $3 grand a week and blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Oh, let me find out who these guys are. Let me see if I can straighten it out." 2 weeks would go by. I'd go back and say, "You know you're messing with here? These guys are part of the DeMeo Crew." Oh, fuck. I don't need this fucking aggravation. I said, "Don't worry about it. I straightened it all out." He says, "You mean I don't gotta pay?" "You don't have to pay the $3 grand a week." But I had to go all the way to the top with this thing. I had to go to the old man
which I call Gambino at the time. He was still alive. And I said, I had to go all the way to the top. I said, out of respect, you know, you got to throw Carlo something every week. How much? And you know, and I said, $1,000. You know, beats the hell out of you getting your brains blown out over $3,000. Oh, thank you. Kissing your hand. I mean, the guy was the happiest motherfucker in the world. And we just shook him down without him even knowing it. It went on for 2 years, and we made a lot of money. We had to go outside the rules of the mob. I mean, it wasn't allowed for me to do anything without permission. It wasn't allowed for us to make money without turning it into the family. Bottom line was, if they found out any of this, I was gonna get popped. Matty Rega was paying my uncle and Roy DeMeo $1,750 a week vig on a $250,000 loan. And what he did was, when my uncle was away and I was taking care of business up here for him, he said that he had given me $30,000 to knock down the loan, which was bullshit. Didn't happen. And he made a to-do of it because he wanted to get out of paying Roy and Nino. So we had this sit down with, I mean, it came to where the bosses of the Genovese family and the boss of the Gambino family had to sit down to straighten it out. And in straightening it out, that's when the Hole in the Wall got exposed, the Hole in the Wall gang. And after that, it was going to be like really, people were going to die. But I knew if I left, because I was going to be the #1 target, if I left, I thought all the heat would come off him, and it did. So I packed my stuff up with my wife and my kids at 4 in the morning, and we just took off for California. I never knew a soul in Los Angeles, and I started hanging out in bars on Sunset Strip. I finally met a bartender who was an ex-Green Beret, and I asked him where the real action was in town, and he told me, he said, this place, the La Hot Club. You know, and I went over there, started hanging out there, and I met this Mexican guy, Al Martinez, and we got friendly, and then he said that there were some Colombians that he wanted me to talk to. And I met this other guy, this Colombian, who ran fucking Los Angeles, the dope in Los Angeles. And what had happened was, this Italian guy who was hooked up with the family in LA had gotten $160,000 worth of product and didn't give them the money. And they didn't want to do anything with him and start a war with the family. So they said, if I could collect the money, you know, street shit, I get half. So I collected the money. When I gave it to them, I pulled a Scarface before Scarface. I told them, I said, no, man. I said, you guys, this is a present. That was it. It opened up the floodgates. I mean, I could get 30 keys in a month and get 200 days to pay it back, you know, because I did that one thing. They moved me to LA. They got me and my wife and my kids a townhouse with a Maserati parked in the garage, a black Maserati Bora. And that was it. I started then. The only problem was I had no way to sell it. I could get it, but I had no way to sell it. So I'm in this after-hours club called the Daisy on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. And that's when Nicole Simpson was a waitress there. And I'm in there, and I get this bottle of champagne over at the table. And the waiter points to this guy at the bar. He said, he just sent it over. And it was a guy I collected the money from, the Italian guy, Glenn Gorio, right? So he comes over to the table, and because I told him to send the bottle back. And he comes over to the table, he says, well, you don't want no champagne, blah, 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 blah. I said, I don't even want to fucking talk to you, man. Leave me the fuck alone. He says, no, he says, I want to talk business. I said, what business I got with you? Because the way I collected the money was pretty nasty. I put a pistol in his mother's mouth. He says, I need somebody like you. I said, well, what could you do for me? Now, it turned out that Gorio was the Beverly Hills connection. He sold to all the movie stars, the producers, all that. So now I had my way to move the shit. So I started to supply him, and it just grew and grew and grew. And within 6 months, I went from welfare to a $2 million home on a private island. I had a company I put together called Canterbury Pest Control. One of my friends had this ex-hooker girlfriend, high-class ex-hooker. And there was this big-ass pimp in Los Angeles. His name was Tootie Roth. Big old hamster, looked like a wall when he moved, right? And he had robbed her grandmother's diamond ring while she was working for him. So she had an attitude about him. So, you know, we're talking one night, and I'm telling her, I said, Joanne, you know, what about this guy? Well, and she's telling me everything. He lived in a mansion in Bel Air, right? But he didn't own it, he rented it. So she gives me this whole fucking spiel about how he keeps all this cash around and blah, 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 blah. So I said, aha. And I put this bogus company together. I mean, no papers or nothing. We robbed a van and we painted it. And I put the sign on it, the magnetic sign. It said Canterbury Pest Control, all right? And we got the jumpsuits with the names and everything. I go down to the Hall of Records. I find out the landlord's name of the place. We had forms printed up, you know, toolboxes. We bought the probes that exterminators use, and we had our little tanks and stuff like that. So we go up there one morning, all right? And it was a gate to get in, so we rang it. Yo, where? I said, Canterbury Pest Control, we have to come in and do a termite inspection. And he said, no, man, nobody coming in today. I said, all right, we just got to tell the landlord that, you know, because it's by law, he has to have this inspection done. He says, oh, man, the gate's open. We get in there, some broad answers the door. And we said, you know, we need to speak to, you know, and here comes Tootie, this big fucking hamster, man. So he said, Now, the idea behind the pest control is this place was so big, is before we made the move, we could check every room and see who's there, what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. So it only turned out to be Tootie and like 2 or 3 broads, I forget. So we're upstairs, we're probing, and we're talking, we're discussing, you know, this wood might be a little rotten, and we're hitting it with the probe, and blah, 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 and we're in the kitchen, because now they were all in the kitchen, and that's what we were waiting for. And we just pulled out. They had this, like, kitchen counter with these poles, so we put the girls like this, we handcuffed them around the poles, and I took Fatso, and I said, come on, you coming with me, you know. And we got up to the bedroom because Joanne had told me that's where he keeps the fucking safe, in the bedroom. So in the bedroom, he asked me, he says, you motherfuckers, you killers or you robbers? I said, right now I'm a robber. I said, you don't tell me where the fucking safe is, I'm gonna be a killer real fucking quick, you fat fuck. So anyway, we made off with 300 and something thousand. I mean, I look back today and just say, what a sick fuck you were. You were just out of your fucking mind. You were running with the hamsters, you were running with the fucking spics, you were running with these guys, those guys, the mob guys. You know, it was just like I was just out of control. You know? But everything I did was working except for that cocksucker, Winnick. You know, I knew everybody in Studio 54, and I got to know this Winnick guy, and he borrowed money from me. He wanted to make these clear military belt buckles, you know, because he felt they would be in vogue, and, you know, we could start the business at studio, selling them, you know, getting people at Studio 54 to buy them, and blah, blah, blah. So I loaned him $20,000 to be a partner with him. And he goes, and he buys, like, I forgot how many jars of Quaaludes off the DEA. So he goes away for 5 years. All right. In the interim, I split, and I'm in California. He gets out of jail. So I say, aha. I get a call from New York. This other Jewish guy, Barry Putash, calls me and says, hey, guess who's out of the joint? I said, who? He said, Winnick. I said, oh, okay. So I brought my penthouse pet of the year with me, because I knew his weakness was women, all right? And this escaped killer from Canada, a French Canadian, right, Val, right? And he escaped from a Canadian max security prison, all right? And I met him because he was trying to collect money off my friends, and they called me and said, we can't handle this fucking guy, you gotta come down here. So I went down there, And me and him really hit it off. So we became partners. So this was the plan. We're gonna come to New York. Danielle's gonna go up to Winnick's office and make like she's looking for a condo. And she had the mink, she had the penthouse key on, you know. And Val was gonna snatch him, all right? So this is like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And they go out, and it worked like a charm, you know. Then Val just told him in the car with a gun to his head. He said, like, you know, you owe this fucking money to Dominick, and we're here to collect the fucking money, and he wants to meet with you. So when it gets, I mean, the mention of my name to this guy, he pees, you know, because I've hung him out his window at the 50th floor on where he lived, all right, just because he wouldn't pay me my fucking money. We tied him with bed sheets, hung him out the window, and he says, all right, look, I can't give you the whole 20. He says, but I can give you installments of 5. So I said, okay. So the next day, I'm having lunch at PJ Clark's with Jake LaMotta and Rocky Graziano, right, and the Penthouse Pet. Val's playing security, trailing Winnick everywhere Winnick goes, all right? Evidently, Winnick made a phone call.
Dominick thought that this fellow owed him, and he had set up a meeting with him. We covered the meeting. Dominick came to a restaurant in Manhattan with a girl from Playboy magazine.
And the task force thought the DeMeo Crew whacked me. They didn't know I was still alive, because I just vanished off the fucking face of New York City, went to California, had a whole nother identity, you know, so they didn't know. They thought I was dead. And so when they called, Frank said, you should have seen us, where we just went, guess who's in town? You know? So, well, I meet Winnick at the Hickory Pit on Madison Avenue on like 56, 59th Street. And we're in there, and I'm talking to him and stuff like that. And he takes out this envelope, and he hands me the envelope with the $5 grand. And I open it, count the $5 grand. As soon as I put it in my jacket pocket, I mean, the restaurant was all feds. The fucking waitresses, the waiters, the customers, they were just guns, you know? I said, Dominick, if you move a fucking muscle, I'm putting your brains on the table. And I'll never forget the line I used. I said, slow down, Moses. I said, I don't even have a fucking piece on me. He said, put your hands on the fucking table. And, I mean, he hated me as much as he hated my fucking uncle. He hated my uncle. Because Frank grew up there in Bensonhurst, you know. So he knew that whole fucking scene in Bensonhurst. And it was funny because we met that way. And now I've slept at his house. I know his grandchildren. I know his daughters. No, I mean, I'm like family now. And, you know, I had a reputation like as a shooter. So they wanted to have, you know, top line security. They had a wire on Winnick and a cab outside that was recording it. But I find out later from Frank, said the fucking tape didn't work. So they had nothing I said on tape. I mean, when I got arrested, when I came back here, the first night, there was an attorney there. And I said, who the fuck are you? So, you know, your uncle heard you got arrested, and that's when I said, oh, no, I ain't dealing with this shit. He says, we can get you out by tomorrow. I said, no, I'll stay right here. I'll take care of my own shit. Because I knew as soon as I got out, I'd get popped. I'm in MCC. These black guys that I knew, did you ever hear Nicky Barnes? The big heroin dealer who's doing life now? Well, he was the biggest heroin dealer in the country, up in Harlem. And I used to know like his whole crew. They just happened to be in jail at MCC when I was there. So Gene Green, like one of Nicky's lieutenants, comes up to me in the fucking chow line one day and he says, hey, he said, the fucking Dago's got a fucking contract out on you. I said, you gotta be kidding me, man. He said, no, man. He said, we heard it. We know, you know? And I said, fuck. He says, you want us to help you out with this here? Because I was really tight with Gene, you know? I mean, our wives knew each other. We used to go out together. I said, no. I said, this is fucking Italian shit, man. You guys stay out of it, you know? And that's, you know, when I confirmed that it was really happening, you know, that's when I just called, you know, the feds and just said, you know, get me out of here. Maybe I have something to talk to you guys about. I mean, they had me out of there in 15 fucking minutes. on the ruse was a bail reduction hearing. But like I hung up the fucking phone, went back to my fucking cell, and the guards were there like within 10 minutes. Come here, we need to talk to you. You got your bail reduction hearing coming up. And they said it loud enough for everybody to understand, everybody to hear. And they swept me out of there. I mean, I was ready to go away and do my time, you know. And then they were gonna kill me inside. And I said, no, I'm not gonna leave a wife and 3 kids just because of their paranoia that I might talk. You know, I haven't talked yet, so why do they think I'm gonna? But you see, I had a wealth of knowledge that if I did, which I did, would have created what it created. Yeah, I mean, 26 mob guys went away. Big time mob guys over my testimony. And they created it, not me. You know, I got arrested, I was doing my fucking time. You know, they decided to take me out for no reason until I found that out. And then I said, fuck you, man. Now, you worried about what I'm gonna say? Now I'm gonna say it. You know.
Should he die for a family that he dearly loved when it was their, what do I want to say, their paranoia with Dominick, thinking he was going to do something to harm the family, and he never would have done that. And his mother never wanted Nino to bring him into the family. Nino didn't listen to her. That was a big mistake. That was a big mistake.
His uncle, you know, as far as I'm concerned, his uncle took him out of a really positive life into a negative life, and then he wants to kill him on top of it after, you know, pimp him to the fucking mob, you know, and using him as a tool because he knew how to kill people and that shit. Basically used him, you know, and the guy got hip to being used and said, fuck you, you know. And it's good for him because that's what they were doing to him. You know, they were fucking, you know, using him like a fucking rubber. Well, fuck you, I ain't a rubber, pal. You know what? Well, fucking come back in your fucking face. That's all he did.
When you're locked up in MCC and you know you got people in there gonna try and kill you. And I can understand if they're gonna try and kill you because you did something. But when they're gonna try and kill you for what they think you might do, then all the fucking rules are off. You know? All the rules were, and that's really important. Because that's what caused me to do what I did. You wouldn't have 90% of the guys that flip without that. If they would have just left them a fucking alone. You know, when they played those tapes for Sammy, what John Gotti said, that sealed Gotti's fate. Because he had to fucking say the shit like that. You know. So it's like, but that's how I got arrested. That's how I met Frank. That was my first encounter with Detective Pergola.
We took him out of prison and we went to a place out in Long Island. And from Long Island, we went to Connecticut. Well, we had a lot of stuff that we took up there with us, you know, rifles, shotguns. And we would get calls every once in a while. They know where you are. They're coming up there, you know. So, I mean, we were only, myself, my partner from the detective division, Ronnie Cadeau, and Kenny McCabe would come up, and Artie Ruffles, and even sometimes the U.S. Attorney came up.
Once we got on the witness protection program, you're not allowed to call anyone, which meant my wife couldn't call her mother. She couldn't call her father or her sisters. If you do want to speak with a relative, you got to call the marshals, and they have this elaborate phone thing that goes through Washington, and it's scrambled, and you know, so nobody could, you know, trace your phone calls and stuff like that. It's basically an impossible way of life if you adhere to all their rules. So of course you don't. You know, I mean, and I was in touch with the task force throughout my whole witness protection thing, because those were really the only ones I trusted. Our allotment was $1,400 a month, which you had to pay rent, you had to buy food, you had to buy furniture, you know. So it's not like where, you know, people think, oh yeah, they're being, you know, it ain't that way at all. It's suffering, you know. I did have a problem with making money, you know, because they give you no job history. They don't help you find a job. So you can't really go to an employer and say, well, yeah, I worked here or I worked here. Not that I ever did work anywhere, but you know, you couldn't even fake it. There is no Dominick Montiglio. Once you go into the witness protection program, that identity disappears. Everything about it disappears. Birth certificates, social security numbers, everything disappears. So anyone that like wants to get on a computer and find if Dominick Montiglio was ever in Vietnam, they're not going to find anything because the U.S. Marshal Service wipes that all out.
I got a list of 30 guys that served with Dominick.
I was in Dominick's platoon in Vietnam, and we shared foxholes together. I think Dominick was with me the first night I got wounded.
We had documentation that he was there. I think he was highly decorated also. And he was a munitions expert. Let me tell you something. He blew up a guy on Bath Avenue with a percussion grenade. Blew him right across the street. Unfortunately, the guy didn't stay out of New York. He came back and Nino killed him.
The first name I had, Dominick D'Angelo, Bob Russo, where I was Chad. Imagine me being called Chad. But you know, it's a goof. When you play with these names, it's a goof. Because you get the name, you get the social security number, you get the whole thing. I was Chad Allington. Imagine me in Birmingham, Alabama, with my accent being called Chad Allington. But that's part of the goof. So after I was Chad, they moved me to Jacksonville, Florida, where I was Rocco Russo. Yeah, I was Larry Moore. They wouldn't care if you called yourself. You could have literally said, my name is Mickey Mouse. They'd have to go along with it. You know, they would. This was before the trials that I had to appear at. And you got to remember something, that you're sitting there, you lay out in the country, you're all alone, and you know that the day is going to come where you're going to walk into a courtroom and everybody you're going to testify against is going to be within reach. I don't know if the word is terrified, but you're basically terrified of that day that you know it's going to happen. So when they moved me to Albuquerque, it was close to the trial. The trial was like 6 months off. The first trial where I had to testify. And they asked me, they said, you know, what name do you want in Albuquerque? And I said, the way I felt was very morose. I mean, so I came up with the name Michael Morose. The people I was testifying against, their lawyers hire private investigators to find you. Most of these private investigators are retired New York City homicide cops, ex-FBI. I mean, they know how to do it. And because we did breach security a bunch of times. They found out where I was, where they had moved us to. I left my wife and kids because basically my wife threw me out because she couldn't handle it no more, the situation we were in the witness protection program. So what I did was I just left. And by leaving, I was basically a wanted man again because I wasn't in the program no more. And I knew everybody, you know, the marshals would be looking for me. I went to California, and I had an old girlfriend out there that I stayed with.
I just knew the first time I saw him, I was there with a gentleman that I was seeing at the time, and my first thought was, this person's dangerous. And then it took like a couple of times of running into him that I kept seeing him. I knew I was going to have something to do with him and be involved with him from that point on.
I was a big weightlifter then. And, you know, I'd go to the gym, and I got a job in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was another one of my stops as a personal trainer. And I met Susie Cream Cheese, who was, till today, one of my main squeezes. What happened was I had to get her into the witness protection program because she wanted to live with me.
Didn't bother me at all. It's like a new adventure for the book. You know, a new chapter. Meet new people. You know, I was with him. I didn't care where I went. I'd go anywhere with him.
And he led us to things that didn't even involve this Gambino crew that we were working on. I mean, that case went from the United States versus Roy DeMeo to the United States versus Nino Gaggi to the United States versus Paul Castellano, who was the head of the Gambino crime family. He led us into this Westies thing, which was another case that we ended up doing. And, well, he was very familiar with Mickey Featherstone. They were in Vietnam together. They arranged this meeting at Tommaso's between them. The Westies were supposed to be kicking in money to Paul Castellano for things that were going on in Manhattan. And from there, we went and made 20 other arrests for 20 other homicides of this Irish crew in Manhattan. So, I mean, he testified in a lot of other trials about wise guys, besides that trial. I mean, this guy put his life on the line, and it cost him his family, and probably his mental status.
We didn't think he'd walk, but that judge was so good. And that statement, his, you know, in the courtroom, if you were just sitting there and listening, and he's saying, we owe you a great deal for what you've done for our country and for us, you know. I mean, bring tears to your eyes, sitting there, just hearing the judge say these things. And you've paid the price. You've paid it more than anybody for you know what you've been through. And you'll have to live with this the rest of your life.
So all my trials were over, everything was done, and I decided to try and get my life back. So I signed off the program, and that had to be damn near 20 years ago. And in that 20 years, it's just been moving from city to city and place to place, and with no direction. You know, and I finally, about 4 years ago, found this art thing, you know. And that's what saved me, really.
We always hoped that someone would get into something besides being a wise guy.
I think he can create a life for himself, of course. I mean, he's that accomplished. His biggest problem, I believe, is boredom. You know, where he wants to be is in the city, but he knows he's got to be careful. But it's so expensive to live there, you know. So where do you go when you've been everywhere and you've done everything? What's left?
It really seems like none of it ever happened. You know, today, it's like I never was in that life. You know, and all the stories we talk about, it's like, when I talk about them, the hardest part for me is to really realize in my head that, wow, this shit really happened, you know. Because now I worry about which piece of fucking canvas I'm going to place. You know, then I used to worry about how I was going to whack this guy.
Right now he needs to paint because he needs to paint, and he needs to sell them to survive. And it's painting at its probably purest. If he's exposed and they kill him, it's almost, you know, it's cheaper. I mean, he doesn't care about that.
Is he in any danger in New York if he were to stay in this area and become an artist? The benefit might outweigh the risk. Yeah.
I don't know, like, you know, how safe it is for me to be in New York City, especially in Brooklyn. It's tough to even leave right now. You know, they're pulling all my teeth. They're giving me, the VA is giving me new teeth.
I'm finally doing something for the first time in my life that is very satisfying.
Everything that I've ever been through is in these paintings. I mean, everything is an experience. I come from a dark place, you know. I mean, I'm a happy little camper, but up here, you know, if it comes to my art or anything else, as a matter of fact, I mean, I can't escape, and you can't. Nobody can escape their past. And my past was just from when I got out of high school until, you know, some years ago. My whole thing was violence.
Those times that I'm alone, I think of you and I start to cry. I get tears in my eyes when you're not there. When I feel so alone, I can't make it stop. I can't make it stop beyond my own. Ain't nobody gonna say